The Loch Ness Monster, or Nessie, is a creature in Scottish folklore that is said to inhabit Loch Ness in the Scottish Highlands. It is often described as large, long-necked, and with one or more humps protruding from the water. Popular interest and belief in the creature has varied since it was brought to worldwide attention in 1933. Evidence of its existence is anecdotal, with a number of disputed photographs and sonar readings. The scientific community regards the Loch Ness Monster as a phenomenon without biological basis, explaining sightings as hoaxes, wishful thinking, and the misidentification of mundane objects. The pseudoscience and subculture of cryptozoology has placed particular emphasis on the creature. The cryptid has been affectionately called Nessie, Scottish Gaelic, Naseeg, since the 1940s. The first modern discussion of a sighting of a strange creature in the loch may have been in the 1870s, when D. Mackenzie claimed to have seen something, wriggling and churning up the water. This account was not published until 1934, however. Research indicates that several newspapers did publish items about a creature in the loch well before 1934. On the 29th of May 1938, South African tourist G.E. Taylor filmed something in the loch for 3 minutes on 16mm color film. The film was obtained by popular science writer Maurice Burton, who did not show it to other researchers. A single frame was published in his 1961 book, The Elusive Monster. His analysis concluded it was a floating object, not an animal. On the 15th of August 1938, William Fraser, Chief Constable of Inverness Shire, wrote a letter that the monster existed beyond doubt and expressed concern about a hunting party that had arrived, with a custom-made harpoon gun, determined to catch the monster, dead or alive. He believed his power to protect the monster from the hunters was very doubtful. The letter was released by the National Archives of Scotland on the 27th of April 2010. In December 1954, sonar readings were taken by the fishing boat Rival 3. Its crew noted a large object keeping pace with the vessel at a depth of 146 meters, 479 feet. It was detected for 800 meters, 2,600 feet, before contact was lost and regained. Previous sonar attempts were inconclusive or negative. Peter McNabb at Urquhart Castle on the 29th of July 1955 took a photograph that depicted 2 long black humps in the water. The photograph was not made public until it appeared in Constance White's 1957 book on the subject. On the 23rd of October 1958 it was published by the Weekly Scotsman. Author Ronald Binns wrote that the phenomenon which McNabb photographed could easily be a wave effect resulting from 3 trawlers traveling closely together up the loch. Other researchers consider the photograph a hoax. Roy Mackall requested to use the photograph in his 1976 book. He received the original negative from McNabb, but discovered it differed from the photograph that appeared in White's book. The tree at the bottom left in White's was missing from the negative. It is suspected that the photograph was doctored by re-photographing a print. The best-known article that first attracted a great deal of attention about a creature was published on the 2nd of May 1933 in Inverness Courier, about a large beast, or whale-like fish. The article by Alex Campbell, water bailiff for Loch Ness and a part-time journalist, discussed a sighting by Aldi Mackay of an enormous creature with the body of a whale rolling in the water in the loch while she and her husband John were driving on the A82 on the 15th of April 1933. The word monster was reportedly applied for the first time in Campbell's article, although some reports claim that it was coined by editor Evan Barron. The Courier in 2017 published excerpts from the Campbell article, which had been titled, "Strange Spectacle in Loch Ness." The creature disported itself, rolling and plunging for fully a minute, its body resembling that of a whale, and the water cascading and churning like a simmering cauldron. Soon, however, it disappeared in a boiling mass of foam. Both onlookers confessed that there was something uncanny about the whole thing, for they realized that here was no ordinary denizen of the depths, because, apart from its enormous size, the beast, in taking the final plunge, sent out waves that were big enough to have been caused by a passing steamer. According to a 2013 article, Mackay said that she had yelled, "Stop!" The beast, when viewing the spectacle. In the late 1980s, a naturalist interviewed Aldi Mackay and she admitted to knowing that there had been an oral tradition of a beast in the loch well before her claimed sighting. Alex Campbell's 1933 article also stated that Loch Ness has for generations been credited with being the home of a fearsome-looking monster. On the 4th of August 1933, the Courier published a report of another alleged sighting. This one was claimed by Londoner George Spicer, the head of a firm of tailors. Several weeks earlier, while they were driving around the loch, he and his wife saw the nearest approach to a dragon or prehistoric animal that I have ever seen in my life, trundling across the road toward the loch with an animal in its mouth. He described it as having a long neck, which moved up and down in the manner of a scenic railway. He said the body was fairly big, with a high back, but if there were any feet they must have been of the web kind, and as for a tail I cannot say, as it moved so rapidly, and when we got to the spot it had probably disappeared into the loch. Letters began appearing in the Courier, often anonymously, claiming land or water sightings by the writer, their family or acquaintances or remembered stories. The accounts reached the media, which described a monster fish, sea serpent, or dragon, and eventually settled on Loch Ness monster. Over the years various hoaxes were also perpetrated, usually proven by photographs that were later debunked. The earliest report of a monster in the vicinity of Loch Ness appears in the Life of Saint Columba by Adamnan, written in the 6th century AD. According to Adamnan, writing about a century after the events described, Irish monk Saint Columba was staying in the land of the Picts with his companions when he encountered local residents burying a man by the river Ness. They explained that the man was swimming in the river when he was attacked by a water beast that mauled him and dragged him underwater. They had tried to rescue him in a boat, but he was killed. Columba sent a follower, Luin Mosisiu Min, to swim across the river. The beast approached him, but Columba made the sign of the cross and said, "Go no further. Do not touch the man. Go back at once." The creature stopped as if it had been pulled back with ropes, and fled, and Columba's men in the Picts gave thanks for what they perceived as a miracle. Believers in the monster point to this story, set in the river Ness rather than the loch itself, as evidence for the creature's existence as early as the 6th century. Skeptics question the narrative's reliability, noting that water beast stories were extremely common in medieval hagiographies and Adamnan's tale probably recycles a common motif attached to a local landmark. According to skeptics, Adamnan's story may be independent of the modern Loch Ness monster legend and became attached to it by believers seeking to bolster their claims. Ronald Binns considers that this is the most serious of various alleged early sightings of the monster, but all other claimed sightings before 1933 are dubious and do not prove a monster tradition before that date. Christopher Kearney uses a specific historical and cultural analysis of Adamnan to separate Adamnan's story about Saint Columba from the modern myth of the Loch Ness monster, but finds an earlier and culturally significant use of Celtic, water beast, folklore along the way. In doing so, he also discredits any strong connection between kelpies or water horses and the modern, media-augmented, creation of the Loch Ness monster. He also concludes that the story of Saint Columba may have been impacted by earlier Irish myths about the Koranic and an oilophaist. In October 1871, or 1872, D. Mackenzie of Balnan reportedly saw an object resembling a log or an upturned boat, wriggling and churning up the water. The object moved slowly at first, disappearing at a faster speed. Mackenzie sent his story in a letter to Rupert Gould in 1934, shortly after popular interest in the monster increased. Hugh Gray's photograph taken near Foyers on the 12th of November 1933 was the first photograph alleged to depict the monster. It was slightly blurred, and it has been noted that if one looks closely the head of a dog can be seen. Gray had taken his Labrador for a walk that day, and it is suspected that the photograph depicts his dog fetching a stick from the loch. Others have suggested that the photograph depicts an otter or a swan. The original negative was lost. However, in 1963, Maurice Burton came into possession of two lantern slides, contact positives from the original negative, and when projected onto a screen they revealed an otter rolling at the surface in characteristic fashion. On the 5th of January 1934, a motorcyclist, Arthur Grant, claimed to have nearly hit the creature while approaching Aubriachin, near the northeastern end of the loch, at about 1 a.m. on a moonlit night. According to Grant, it had a small head attached to a long neck. The creature saw him and crossed the road back to the loch. Grant, a veterinary student, described it as a cross between a seal and a plesiosaur. He said he dismounted and followed it to the loch, but saw only ripples. Grant produced a sketch of the creature that was examined by zoologist Maurice Burton, who stated it was consistent with the appearance and behavior of an otter. Regarding the long size of the creature reported by Grant, it has been suggested that this was a faulty observation due to the poor light conditions. Paleontologist Darren Nash has suggested that Grant may have seen either an otter or a seal and exaggerated his sighting over time. The surgeon's photograph is reportedly the first photo of the creature's head and neck. Supposedly taken by Robert Kenneth Wilson, a London gynecologist, it was published in the Daily Mail on the 21st of April 1934. Wilson's refusal to have his name associated with it led to it being known as the surgeon's photograph. According to Wilson, he was looking at the loch when he saw the monster, grabbed his camera and snapped 4 photos. Only 2 exposures came out clearly. The first reportedly shows a small head and back, and the second shows a similar head in a diving position. The first photo became well known, and the second attracted little publicity because of its blurriness. For 60 years the photo was considered evidence of the monster's existence, although skeptics dismissed it as driftwood, an elephant, an otter or a bird. The photo's scale was controversial. It is often shown cropped, making the creature seem large and the ripples like waves, while the uncropped shot shows the other end of the loch and the monster in the center. The ripples in the photo were found to fit the size and pattern of small ripples, rather than large waves photographed up close. Analysis of the original image fostered further doubt. In 1993, the makers of the Discovery Communications documentary Loch Ness analyzed the uncropped image and found a white object visible in every version of the photo, implying that it was on the negative. It was believed to be the cause of the ripples, as if the object was being towed, although the possibility of a blemish on the negative could not be ruled out. An analysis of the full photograph indicated that the object was small, about 60 to 90 centimeters, 2 to 3 feet long. Since 1994, most agree that the photo was an elaborate hoax. It had been described as fake in the 7th of December 1975 Sunday Telegraph article that fell into obscurity. Details of how the photo was taken were published in the 1999 book, Nessie, The Surgeon's Photograph Exposed, which contains a facsimile of the 1975 Sunday Telegraph article. The creature was reportedly a toy submarine built by Christian Sperling, the son-in-law of Marmaduke Wetherill. Wetherill had been publicly ridiculed by his employer, the Daily Mail, after he found Nessie footprints that turned out to be a hoax. To get revenge on the Mail, Wetherill perpetrated his hoax with co-conspirators Sperling, sculpture specialist, Ian Wetherill, his son, who bought the material for the fake, and Maurice Chambers, an insurance agent. The toy submarine was bought from F.W. Woolworths, and its head and neck were made from wood putty. After testing it in a local pond, the group went to Loch Ness, where Ian Wetherill took the photos near the Altside tea house. When they heard a water bailiff approaching, Duke Wetherill sank the model with his foot, and it is presumably still somewhere in Loch Ness. Chambers gave the photographic plates to Wilson, a friend of his who enjoyed a good practical joke. Wilson brought the plates to Ogston's, an Inverness chemist, and gave them to George Morrison for development. He sold the first photo to the Daily Mail, who then announced that the monster had been photographed. Little is known of the second photo. It is often ignored by researchers, who believe its quality too poor and its differences from the first photo too great to warrant analysis. It shows a head similar to the first photo, with a more turbulent wave pattern and possibly taken at a different time and location in the loch. Some believe it to be an earlier, cruder attempt at a hoax, and others, including Roy Mackal and Maurice Burden, consider it a picture of a diving bird or otter that Wilson mistook for the monster. According to Morrison, when the plates were developed, Wilson was uninterested in the second photo. He allowed Morrison to keep the negative, and the photo was rediscovered years later. When asked about the second photo by the Ness Information Service newsletter, Sperling was vague, thought it might have been a piece of wood they were trying out as a monster, but was not sure. In 1888, Mason Alexander MacDonald of Aubreyton sighted a large stubby-legged animal surfacing from the loch and propelling itself within 50 yards of the shore where MacDonald stood. MacDonald reported his sighting to Loch Ness water bailiff Alex Campbell, and described the creature as looking like a salamander. Modern interest in the monster was sparked by a sighting on the 22nd of July 1933, when George Spicer and his wife saw a most extraordinary form of animal cross the road in front of their car. They described the creature as having a large body, about 4 feet, 1.2 meters high and 25 feet, 8 meters long, and a long, wavy, narrow neck, slightly thicker than an elephant's trunk and as long as the 10 to 12 foot, 3 to 4 meters, width of the road. They saw no limbs. It lurched across the road toward the loch 20 yards, 20 meters away, leaving a trail of broken undergrowth in its wake. It has been claimed that sightings of the monster increased after a road was built along the loch in early 1933, bringing workers and tourists to the formerly isolated area. However, Binns has described this as the myth of the Lonely Loch, as it was far from isolated before then, due to the construction of the Caledonian Canal. In the 1930s, the existing road by the side of the loch was given a serious upgrade. Just possibly this work could have contributed to the legend, since there could have been tar barrels floating in the loch. Aeronautical engineer Tim Dinsdale filmed a hump that left a wake crossing Loch Ness in 1960. Dinsdale, who reportedly had the sighting on his final day of search, described it as reddish with a blotch on its side. He said that when he mounted his camera the object began to move, and he shot 40 feet of film. According to Jarek, the object was probably animate. Others were skeptical, saying that the hump cannot be ruled out as being a boat, and when the contrast is increased, a man in a boat can be seen. In 1993, Discovery Communications produced a documentary, Loch Ness Discovered, with a digital enhancement of the Dinsdale film. A person who enhanced the film noticed a shadow in the negative that was not obvious in the developed film. By enhancing and overlaying frames, he found what appeared to be the rear body of a creature underwater. Before I saw the film, I thought the Loch Ness monster was a load of rubbish. Having done the enhancement, I'm not so sure. On the 21st of May 1977, Anthony "Doc" Shields, camping next to Urquhart Castle, took some of the clearest pictures of the monster until this day. Shields, a magician and psychic, claimed to have summoned the animal out of the water. He later described it as an elephant squid, claiming the long neck shown in the photograph is actually the squid's trunk, and that a white spot at the base of the neck is its eye. Due to the lack of ripples, it has been declared a hoax by a number of people and received its name because of its staged look. On the 26th of May 2007, 55-year-old laboratory technician Gordon Holmes videotaped what he said was this jet black thing, about 14 meters, 46 feet, long, moving fairly fast in the water. Adrian Shine, a marine biologist at the Loch Ness 2000 Center in Drumnadrochit, described the footage as among the best footage he had ever seen. BBC Scotland broadcast the video on the 29th of May 2007. STV News North Tonight aired the footage on the 28th of May 2007 and interviewed Holmes. Shine was also interviewed, and suggested that the footage was an otter, seal or waterbird. On the 24th of August 2011, Loch Ness boat captain Marcus Atkinson photographed a sonar image of a 1.5 meter wide, 4.9 feet, unidentified object that seemed to follow his boat for 2 minutes at a depth of 23 meters, 75 feet, and ruled out the possibility of a small fish or seal. In April 2012, a scientist from the National Oceanography Center said that the image is a bloom of algae and zooplankton. The researchers returned, re-scanning the area. Analysis of the echo sounder images seemed to indicate debris at the bottom of the loch, although there was motion in 3 of the pictures. Adrian Shine speculated, based on size, that they might be seals that had entered the loch. Sonar expert Daryl Lawrence, founder of Lawrence Electronics, donated a number of echo sounder units used in the operation. After examining a sonar return indicating a large, moving object at a depth of 180 meters, 590 feet, near Urquhart Bay, Lawrence said, "There's something here that we don't understand, and there's something here that's larger than a fish. Maybe some species that hasn't been detected before. I don't know." In 2003, the BBC sponsored a search of the loch using 600 sonar beams and satellite tracking. The search had sufficient resolution to identify a small buoy. No animal of substantial size was found, and, despite their reported hopes, the scientists involved admitted that this proved the Loch Ness monster was a myth. Searching for the Loch Ness monster aired on BBC One. An international team consisting of researchers from the universities of Otago, Copenhagen, Hull and the Highlands and Islands, did a DNA survey of the lake in June 2018, looking for unusual species. The results were published in 2019. There was no DNA of large fish such as sharks, sturgeons and catfish. There was no otter or seal DNA either. A lot of eel DNA was found. The leader of the study, Professor Neil Gemmell of the University of Otago, said he could not rule out the possibility of eels of extreme size, though none were found, nor were any ever caught. The other possibility is that the large amount of eel DNA simply comes from many small eels. No evidence of any reptilian sequences were found, he added, so I think we can be fairly sure that there is probably not a giant scaly reptile swimming around in Loch Ness, he said. A number of explanations have been suggested to account for sightings of the creature. According to Ronald Binns, a former member of the Loch Ness Phenomena Investigation Bureau, there is probably no single explanation of the monster. Binns wrote 2 skeptical books, the 1983 The Loch Ness Mystery Solved, and his 2017 The Loch Ness Mystery Reloaded. In these he contends that an aspect of human psychology is the ability of the eye to see what it wants and expects to see. They may be categorized as misidentifications of known animals, misidentifications of inanimate objects or effects, reinterpretations of Scottish folklore, hoaxes, and exotic species of large animals. A reviewer wrote that Binns had evolved into the author of the definitive, skeptical book on the subject. Binns does not call the sightings a hoax, but a myth in the true sense of the term, and states that the monster is a sociological phenomenon. After 1983, the search for the possibility that there just might be continues to enthrall a small number for whom eyewitness evidence outweighs all other considerations. On the 3rd of August 2012, skipper George Edwards claimed that a photo he took on the 2nd of November 2011 shows Nessie. Edwards claims to have searched for the monster for 26 years, and reportedly spent 60 hours per week on the loch aboard his boat, Nessie Hunter IV, taking tourists for rides on the lake. Edwards said, "In my opinion, it probably looks kind of like a manatee, but not a mammal. When people see 3 humps, they're probably just seeing 3 separate monsters." Other researchers have questioned the photograph's authenticity, and Loch Ness researcher Steve Feltham suggested that the object in the water is a fiberglass hump used in a National Geographic Channel documentary in which Edwards had participated. Researcher Dick Rayner has questioned Edwards' claim of discovering a deeper bottom of Loch Ness, which Rayner calls Edwards Deep. He found inconsistencies between Edwards' claims for the location and conditions of the photograph and the actual location and weather conditions that day. According to Rayner, Edwards told him he had faked a photograph in 1986 that he claimed was genuine in the Nat Geo documentary. Although Edwards admitted in October 2013 that his 2011 photograph was a hoax, he insisted that the 1986 photograph was genuine. A survey of the literature about other hoaxes, including photographs, published by the Scientific American on the 10th of July 2013, indicates many others since the 1930s. The most recent photo, considered to be good, appeared in newspapers in August 2012. It was allegedly taken by George Edwards in November 2011 but was definitely a hoax, according to the Science Journal. On the 27th of August 2013, tourist David Elder presented a 5-minute video of a mysterious wave in the loch. According to Elder, the wave was produced by a 4.5 meters, 15 feet, solid black object, just under the surface of the water. Elder, 50, from East Kilbride, South Lanarkshire, was taking a picture of a swan at the Fort Augustus Pier on the southwestern end of the loch when he captured the movement. He said, "The water was very still at the time and there were no ripples coming off the wave and no other activity on the water." Skeptics suggested that the wave may have been caused by a wind gust. On the 19th of April 2014, it was reported that a satellite image on Apple Maps showed what appeared to be a large creature, thought by some to be the Loch Ness monster, just below the surface of Loch Ness. At the loch's far north, the image appeared about 30 meters, 98 feet, long. Possible explanations were the wake of a boat, with the boat itself lost in image stitching or low-contrast, seal-caused ripples, or floating wood. In 1972, a group of researchers from the Academy of Applied Science led by Robert H. Rines conducted a search for the monster involving sonar examination of the loch depths for unusual activity. Rines took precautions to avoid murky water with floating wood and peat. A submersible camera with a floodlight was deployed to record images below the surface. If Rines detected anything on the sonar, he turned the light on and took pictures. On the 8th of August, Rines' Raytheon DE-725C sonar unit, operating at a frequency of 200 kHz and anchored at a depth of 11 meters, 36 feet, identified a moving target, or targets, estimated by echo strength at 6 to 9 meters, 20 to 30 feet, in length. Specialists from Raytheon, Simrad, now Kongsberg Maritime, Hydroacoustics, Marty Klein of MIT and Klein Associates, a side-scan sonar producer, and Ira Dyer of MIT's Department of Ocean Engineering were on hand to examine the data. P. Skitsky of Raytheon suggested that the data indicated a 3-meter, 10 feet, protuberance projecting from one of the echoes. According to author Roy Mackle, the shape was a highly flexible laterally flattened tail, or the misinterpreted return from 2 animals swimming together. Concurrent with the sonar readings, the floodlit camera obtained a pair of underwater photographs. Both depicted what appeared to be a rhomboid flipper, although skeptics have dismissed the images as depicting the bottom of the loch, air bubbles, a rock, or a fish fin. The apparent flipper was photographed in different positions, indicating movement. The first flipper photo is better known than the second, and both were enhanced and retouched from the original negatives. According to team member Charles Wyckoff, the photos were retouched to superimpose the flipper. The original enhancement showed a considerably less distinct object. No one is sure how the originals were altered. During a meeting with Tony Harmsworth and Adrian Shine at the Loch Ness Center and Exhibition, Rines admitted that the flipper photo may have been retouched by a magazine editor. British naturalist Peter Scott announced in 1975, on the basis of the photographs, that the creature's scientific name would be Nessiteras rhomboteryx, Greek for Ness inhabitant with diamond-shaped fin. Scott intended that the name would enable the creature to be added to the British Register of Protected Wildlife. Scottish politician Nicholas Fairbairn called the name an anagram for monster hoax by Sir Peter S. However, Rines countered that when rearranged, the letters could also spell, yes, both pics are monsters, are. Another sonar contact was made, this time with two objects estimated to be about 9 meters, 30 feet. The strobe camera photographed two large objects surrounded by a flurry of bubbles. Some interpreted the objects as two plesiosaur-like animals, suggesting several large animals living in Loch Ness. This photograph has rarely been published. Google commemorated the 81st anniversary of the surgeon's photograph with a Google Doodle, and added a new feature to Google Street View with which users can explore the loch above and below the water. Google reportedly spent a week at Loch Ness collecting imagery with a Street View tracker camera, attaching it to a boat to photograph above the surface and collaborating with members of the Catlin Seaview Survey to photograph underwater. After reading Rupert Gould's The Loch Ness Monster and others, Edward Mountain financed a search. 20 men with binoculars and cameras positioned themselves around the loch from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. for 5 weeks, beginning on the 13th of July 1934. Although 21 photographs were taken, none was considered conclusive. Supervisor James Fraser remained by the loch filming on the 15th of September 1934. The film is now lost. Zoologists and professors of natural history concluded that the film showed a seal, possibly a gray seal. The Loch Ness Phenomena Investigation Bureau, LNPIB, was a UK-based society formed in 1962 by Norman Collins, RSR Fitter, politician David James, Peter Scott and Constance White, to study Loch Ness to identify the creature known as the Loch Ness Monster or determine the causes of reports of it. The society's name was later shortened to the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau, LNIB, and it disbanded in 1972. The LNIB had an annual subscription charge, which covered administration. Its main activity was encouraging groups of self-funded volunteers to watch the loch from vantage points with film cameras with telescopic lenses. From 1965 to 1972 it had a caravan camp and viewing platform at Achnahannet, and sent observers to other locations up and down the loch. According to the Bureau's 1969 annual report, it had 1,030 members, of whom 588 were from the UK. D. Gordon Tucker, chair of the Department of Electronic and Electrical Engineering at the University of Birmingham, volunteered his services as a sonar developer and expert at Loch Ness in 1968. His gesture, part of a larger effort led by the LNPIB from 1967 to 1968, involved collaboration between volunteers and professionals in a number of fields. Tucker had chosen Loch Ness as the test site for a prototype sonar transducer with a maximum range of 800 meters, 2,600 feet. The device was fixed underwater at Temple Pier in Urquhart Bay and directed at the opposite shore, drawing an acoustic net across the loch through which no moving object could pass undetected. During the 2-week trial in August, multiple targets were identified. One was probably a shoal of fish, but others moved in a way not typical of shoals at speeds up to 10 knots. A second search was conducted by Rines in 1975. Some of the photographs, despite their obviously murky quality and lack of concurrent sonar readings, did indeed seem to show unknown animals in various positions and lightings. One photograph appeared to show the head, neck, and upper torso of a plesiosaur-like animal, but skeptics argue the object is a log due to the lump on its chest area, the mass of sediment in the full photo, and the object's log-like skin texture. Another photograph seemed to depict a horned, gargoyle head, consistent with that of some sightings of the monster. However, skeptics point out that a tree stump was later filmed during Operation Deepscan in 1987, which bore a striking resemblance to the gargoyle head. In 2001, Rhine's Academy of Applied Science videotaped a V-shaped wake traversing still water on a calm day. The Academy also videotaped an object on the floor of the loch resembling a carcass and found marine clamshells and a fungus-like organism not normally found in freshwater lochs, a suggested connection to the sea and a possible entry for the creature. In 2008, Rhines theorized that the creature may have become extinct, citing the lack of significant sonar readings and a decline in eyewitness accounts. He undertook a final expedition, using sonar and an underwater camera in an attempt to find a carcass. Rhines believed that the animals may have failed to adapt to temperature changes resulting from global warming. Operation DeepScan was conducted in 1987. 24 boats equipped with echo-sounding equipment were deployed across the width of the loch, and simultaneously sent acoustic waves. According to BBC News, the scientists had made sonar contact with an unidentified object of unusual size and strength. Wakes have been reported when the loch is calm, with no boats nearby. Bartender David Monroe reported a wake he believed was a creature zigzagging, diving, and reappearing. There were reportedly 26 other witnesses from a nearby car park. Although some sightings describe a V-shaped wake similar to a boat's, others report something not conforming to the shape of a boat. A large eel was an early suggestion for what the monster was. Eels are found in Loch Ness, and an unusually large one would explain many sightings. Dinsdale dismissed the hypothesis because eels undulate side to side like snakes. Sightings in 1856 of a sea serpent, or kelpie, in a freshwater lake near Lerbost in the Outer Hebrides were explained as those of an oversized eel, also believed common in Highland lakes. From 2018 to 2019, scientists from New Zealand undertook a massive project to document every organism in Loch Ness based on DNA samples. Their reports confirmed that European eels are still found in the loch. No DNA samples were found for large animals such as catfish, Greenland sharks, or plesiosaurs. Many scientists now believe that giant eels account for many, if not most of the sightings. In a 1979 article, California biologist Dennis Power and geographer Donald Johnson claimed that the surgeon's photograph was the top of the head, extended trunk and flared nostrils of a swimming elephant photographed elsewhere and claimed to be from Loch Ness. In 2006, paleontologist and artist Neil Clark suggested that traveling circuses might have allowed elephants to bathe in the loch. The trunk could be the perceived head and neck, with the head and back the perceived humps. In support of this, Clark provided a painting. Zoologist, angler and television presenter Jeremy Wade investigated the creature in 2013 as part of the series River Monsters, and concluded that it is a Greenland shark. The Greenland shark, which can reach up to 20 feet in length, inhabits the North Atlantic Ocean around Canada, Greenland, Iceland, Norway, and possibly Scotland. It is dark in color, with a small dorsal fin. According to biologist Bruce Wright, the Greenland shark could survive in freshwater, possibly using rivers and lakes to find food, and Loch Ness has an abundance of salmon and other fish. In July 2015, 3 news outlets reported that Steve Feltham, after a vigil at the loch that was recognized by the Guinness Book of Records, theorized that the monster is an unusually large specimen of Wells catfish, Silurus glanus, which may have been released during the late 19th century. It is difficult to judge the size of an object in water through a telescope or binoculars with no external reference. Loch Ness has resident otters, and photos of them and deer swimming in the loch, which were cited by author Ronald Binns, may have been misinterpreted. According to Binns, birds may be mistaken for a head and neck sighting. In 1933, the Daily Mirror published a picture with the caption, "This queerly shaped tree trunk, washed ashore at Foyers, on Loch Ness, may, it is thought, be responsible for the reported appearance of a monster." In a 1982 series of articles for New Scientist, Maurice Burton proposed that sightings of Nessie and similar creatures may be fermenting Scots pine logs rising to the surface of the loch. The decomposing log could not initially release gases caused by decay because of its high resin level. Gas pressure would eventually rupture a resin seal at one end of the log, propelling it through the water, sometimes to the surface. According to Burton, the shape of tree logs, with their branch stumps, closely resembles descriptions of the monster. Loch Ness, because of its long, straight shape, is subject to unusual ripples affecting its surface. A seachie is a large oscillation of a lake, caused by water reverting to its natural level after being blown to one end of the lake, resulting in a standing wave. The Loch Ness oscillation period is 31.5 minutes. Wind conditions can give a choppy, matte appearance to the water with calm patches appearing dark from the shore, reflecting the mountains. In 1979, W.H. Lane showed that atmospheric refraction could distort the shape and size of objects and animals, and later published a photograph of a mirage of a rock on Lake Winnipeg that resembled a head and neck. Italian geologist Luigi Picardi has proposed geological explanations for ancient legends and myths. Picardi noted that in the earliest recorded sighting of a creature, the life of Saint Columba, the creature's emergence was accompanied, cum ingenti fremitu, with loud roaring. The Loch Ness is along the Great Glen Fault, and this could be a description of an earthquake. Many reports consist only of a large disturbance on the surface of the water. This could be a release of gas through the fault, although it may be mistaken for something swimming below the surface. In 1980, Swedish naturalist and author Bengt Sjögren wrote that present beliefs in lake monsters such as the Loch Ness monster are associated with Kelpie legends. According to Sjögren, accounts of loch monsters have changed over time. Originally describing horse-like creatures, they were intended to keep children away from the loch. Sjögren wrote that the Kelpie legends have developed into descriptions reflecting a modern awareness of plesiosaurs. The Kelpie as a waterhorse in Loch Ness was mentioned in an 1879 Scottish newspaper, and inspired Tim Dinsdale's Project Waterhorse. A study of pre-1933 Highland folklore references to Kelpies, waterhorses and waterbulls indicated that Ness was the loch most frequently cited. A number of hoax attempts have been made, some of which were successful. Other hoaxes were revealed rather quickly by the perpetrators or exposed after diligent research. A few examples follow. In August 1933, Italian journalist Francesco Gasparini submitted what he said was the first news article on the Loch Ness monster. In 1959, he reported sighting a strange fish and fabricated eyewitness accounts. I had the inspiration to get hold of the item about the strange fish. The idea of the monster had never dawned on me, but then I noted that the strange fish would not yield a long article, and I decided to promote the imaginary being to the rank of monster without further ado. In the 1930s, big game hunter Marmaduke Wetherill went to Loch Ness to look for the monster. Wetherill claimed to have found footprints, but when casts of the footprints were sent to scientists for analysis, they turned out to be from a hippopotamus. A prankster had used a hippopotamus foot umbrella stand. In 1972, a team of zoologists from Yorkshire's Flamingo Park Zoo, searching for the monster, discovered a large body floating in the water. The corpse, 4.9 to 5.4 meters, 16 to 18 feet, long and weighing as much as 1.5 tons, was described by the Press Association as having a bear's head and a brown scaly body with claw-like fins. The creature was placed in a van to be carried away for testing, but police seized the cadaver under an Act of Parliament prohibiting the removal of unidentified creatures from Loch Ness. It was later revealed that Flamingo Park Education Officer John Shields shaved the whiskers and otherwise disfigured a bull elephant seal that had died the week before and dumped it in Loch Ness to dupe his colleagues. On the 2nd of July 2003, Gerald McSorley discovered a fossil, supposedly from the creature, when he tripped and fell into the loch. After examination, it was clear that the fossil had been planted. In 2004, a 5 TV documentary team, using cinematic special effects experts, tried to convince people that there was something in the loch. They constructed an animatronic model of a plesiosaur, calling it Lucy. Despite setbacks, including Lucy falling to the bottom of the loch, about 600 sightings were reported where she was placed. In 2005, 2 students claimed to have found a large tooth embedded in the body of a deer on the loch shore. They publicized the find, setting up a website, but expert analysis soon revealed that the tooth was the antler of a muntjac. The tooth was a publicity stunt to promote a horror novel by Steve Alton, The Loch. In 1933, it was suggested that the creature bears a striking resemblance to the supposedly extinct plesiosaur, a long-necked aquatic reptile that became extinct during the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event. A popular explanation at the time, the following arguments have been made against it. In an October 2006 New Scientist article, Why the Loch Ness Monster is No Plesiosaur, Leslie Noe of the Sedgwick Museum in Cambridge said, "The osteology of the neck makes it absolutely certain that the plesiosaur could not lift its head up swan-like out of the water. The loch is only about 10,000 years old, dating to the end of the last ice age. Before then, it was frozen for about 20,000 years. If creatures similar to plesiosaurs lived in Loch Ness, they would be seen frequently, since they would have to surface several times a day to breathe." In response to these criticisms, Tim Dinsdale, Peter Scott and Roy Mackal postulate a trapped marine creature that evolved from a plesiosaur directly or by convergent evolution. Robert Rines explained that the horns, in some sightings, function as breathing tubes or nostrils, allowing it to breathe without breaking the surface. R.T. Gould suggested a long-necked newt. Roy Mackal examined the possibility, giving it the highest score, 88%, on his list of possible candidates. In 1968, F.W. Ted Holliday proposed that Nessie and other lake monsters, such as morag, may be a large invertebrate such as a bristleworm. He cited the extinct Telemonstrum as an example of the shape. According to Holliday, this explains the land sightings and the variable back shape. He likened it to the medieval description of dragons as worms. Although this theory was considered by Mackal, he found it less convincing than eels, amphibians, or plesiosaurs.
Thank you for listening to Animystery. If you like our content, please subscribe to this channel so that you won't miss any future videos.